Last chapter of Wind in the Willows is chapter 11, The Return of Ulysses. When it began to grow dark, they all assembled in Rat's parlor, and Rat gave each one his sword and pistols. But Badger just laughed good-humoredly. "I'm going to do all I've got to do with this here stick," he said. When they were ready, Badger took a lantern and led them along by the river, and then into a hole in the river bank. Mole and Rat followed silently, but when it came to Toad's turn, of course, he managed to slip and fell into the water. He was hauled out by his friends, but Badger was very cross. A little while later they were creeping along the secret passage, which was dark and cold and damp. Toad was hurrying to keep up with the others when he bumped into Rat, who bumped into Mole, who fell over. Badger thought they were being attacked from behind, and he very nearly shot Toad with his pistol. After that, Rat kept a firm grip on Toad's shoulder to keep him out of trouble. And so they groped and shuffled along the secret passage until they came to a trap door. Badger said, "Now, boys, all together." They found themselves in the pantry with only a door between them and the banqueting hall. They could hear the weasels cheering and singing. Badger cried, "Follow me," and he flung the door open wide. My, what a squealing and a squeaking and a screeching filled the air! Mole had gone outside to deal with the sentries. "It's all over," he reported back. They had been expecting an attack from outside, but as soon as they heard the shrieks and yells inside the hall, they threw down their rifles and fled. They've all disappeared by now, and I've got their rifles." And so the four friends sat down to a great supper of chicken and jelly and trifle. Next day, Badger told Toad that he must hold a banquet to celebrate, and that he should write the invitations himself. While the others were out, Toad did as he was told, but he also included a program for the banquet. This was to be full of boastful speeches and songs by Toad, all about Toad. He gave the letters to one of the weasels to post. When Badger, Rat, and Mole came back, they eyed Toad with a good deal of suspicion. They had met the weasel carrying Toad's invitations and had taken them all off of him. "No speeches and no songs," said Rat firmly. "You know you must turn over a new leaf, and now is the time to begin." Toad thought for a long while. Eventually he said, "All right, I won't boast any more. From now on I will be a very different Toad. You will never have to blush for me again. But oh dear, this is a hard world." Toad went up to his bedroom. At first he was very sad. Then he began to smile. Then he giggled. He locked the door, drew the curtains, arranged all the chairs in a semicircle, and sang his boastful song very loudly to the empty chairs. After that he felt better. At last the hour for the banquet began to draw near, and while Toad was still making a speech to his empty bedroom, the first of the animals began to arrive. They were all dressed up in best suits. Upstairs, Toad finished off his speech with a flourish and a bow to the vacant chairs. Then he heaved a deep sigh, a long, long, long sigh. Then he straightened his bow tie, adjusted his jacket, then put a gracefully modest expression on his face. He went downstairs to welcome all the guests to the banquet. The animals cheered when he entered and congratulated him. But Toad only smiled faintly and murmured, "Not at all." He was indeed an altered Toad. After all this excitement, the four animals continued to be friends. They would often take a stroll together in the wild wood, and it was pleasing to see how the mother weasels would bring out their young ones and point them out. "There goes the great Mr. Toad, and the gallant water rat, and the famous Mr. Mole," they would say. And when their children were naughty, they would tell them that the terrible grey Badger would come and get them if they didn't behave themselves, which was a little unfair on Badger, because he was rather fond of children. But it never failed. The end.